I met a guy who I ended up dating for quite some time and fell very hard for. And our first date turned into like a weekend long hangout. It was just this like continuous not wanting to stop hanging out. And so drinks turned into dinner, turned into sleepover, turned into day at the park, turned into, I think, Sunday afternoon watching TV, and it was just like a very clear feeling of excitement that I hadn't had for a really long time.
What happened with that person?
Oh, that guy broke my heart. I mean, I was really into that relationship, but this was a habit for me for a long time, was like trying to find my identity through relationships. And I think I was so into that relationship because this guy was an academic, he was a writer, he was an avid reader, he was a former musician, all these kind of creative pursuits that I, in another lifetime, wish that I could pursue. I was an engineer, I was a business school graduate. I was like, in my own definition, very lame. And so I pursued artists and these kind of like more creative types as a way to augment my personality. And I was really enamored by his life. And as you can imagine, that relationship didn't work out very well because it was basically me like feeding off of him and feeling deeply insecure about my own self. But at the time, I was very wrapped up in it. I essentially wanted to be him, which is like not the best premise for a relationship if it's one-sided. I think it's very important to respect someone and be inspired by someone, but this was a different dynamic. And so we dated really intensely. I think it's a lie to say that I'm like completely secure now or have figured that all out and that never happens. That's still a pattern that I have to actively fight against. I think attraction for me is very, very tied to admiration. And it's something I'm constantly kind of like checking myself against. And I spend so much time by myself. And I just kind of like found myself in writing, weirdly. Like that really freed me from this need to like feel like I had to date a certain person to be a certain person. The break from dating in general was very healthy. I started to find in New York that I was like intensely attracted to women, and I started to date women, and not successfully. I'm still exploring that part of myself because it's very scary to me, but because I like women so much. But a lot of things changed when I moved to New York.
Last year you wrote an article titled I think it's called The Art of Being Completely Alone.
Yes.
Tell me about that idea and how you feel about it now.
Okay. Yeah, The Art of Being Completely Alone was maybe my most popular essay so far. It's basically about kind of this thing that I've started to do every year where I take a few months in the summer and I go to a cabin in Vermont and I just kind of like am totally alone. I crave solitude so much I was for a long time, and it felt like unproductive or like people look down on it, or like if you're not with other people then that's sad or you must be kind of lonely. But what I was craving in that solitude was kind of, and this is what I say in the essay, I was like craving a space to figure out who I was when I was not trying to perform for other people. And I think, a big tendency I have, and I think a lot of people have, and especially a lot of women have, is this need to be liked and to be kind of feeling like you're being the optimal version of yourself. And I don't think I had ever sincerely asked myself, like, what is just me? What do I want? Like, what makes me happy? Like, the most feminist thing of all is to just kind of fuck everything and be like, what do you want, and go after that. And the feminist dialogue in our culture leaves no room for that, because it's like, to be this powerful woman, you have XYZ. It's not to be this powerful woman, you're doing whatever the hell you want to be doing, which is that, you know, what it should be. I'm in the middle of the journey of figuring out what it is that I want. I will say very specifically, like kids is a big portion of that, and I don't think it's talked about enough. It's shocking to me that we still kind of assume that everyone wants kids. It's talked about way more than when I was younger, but like pieces of art, you know, Sheila Heti wrote this book, Motherhood, and it's just this entire novel about exploring the question of whether or not to have kids. Like nothing happens in it. It's just a rumination on whether or not to have kids. And I'm obsessed with her, and I'm obsessed with that book. And in an interview, she was like, if men were deciding whether or not they wanted to have kids or had to, you know, bear the child in that way, there would be entire volumes and theses and like whole things written about this question. And it's just kind of assumed for women, or we don't give ourselves the space to like create art out of that. Something that is really a philosophical question, not necessarily an assumption. And I always assumed I would have kids because, again, that's what success looked like, was like a family was part of that equation. And it just didn't, you know, a relationship and that path didn't really happen to me. It's not like I was on it and I was like, fuck, I don't want this. It just like didn't happen. And then I was like, wait, do I want that? Because to make that happen for me right now, I would have to be very intentional about it. I would have to be like very actively pursuing a relationship. I don't have the money to have kids by myself, nor do I really want to do that. And I don't, and so it's not a question of like, do I want kids or not? How I frame it, and I write about this too, is like, at what cost? Like, yes, if I was a millionaire and I was married to someone who I'm totally in love with and we just happened to get pregnant and like everything was great, like sure, I would love to have a baby. But like, definitely not a millionaire, would need to actually actively pursue a loving relationship in a way that would take a lot of my time. And I have a ton of other things going on in my life, so I just don't know that I want a baby at the cost of like the other things in my life right now. But it becomes a very real question when you're in your late 30s, in a way that when I was younger, I was like, I don't know, I kind of like looked down on thinking about it so particularly and like specifically or something, like things just kind of happen or not. But at some point when you're facing like, okay, I literally have like maybe a few years left to have kids, you actually have to think about it in a very practical way. Like, do I want to intentionally go after a partnership and a relationship right now in order to have kids? Like, that seems incredibly pragmatic for something that should just be like romantic and happen and whatever. And that feels weird to me, but I don't disrespect women who do that, because it's an incredibly practical, like it's a reality that we have to face in our biology. I used to think I could kind of map out my life and know what that looked like, and I have no idea, like in 10 years what. I hope I'm in for writing a novel somewhere, but who knows. So yeah, it's a constant figuring out. I don't feel like I have that figured out at all, what I want.